I'll never forget getting to Indiana University and having the biology professor, he made a religious statement, said, God does not exist, and I'm going to use this semester to prove it to you. It worked.
What kind of book is the Torah? What kind of book is the Bible? Whatever the subject I looked into, whether it was how many times should you date before you get married? What should you wear in the morning? How should you overcome adversity? Every piece of guidance the Bible gives has been proven true by modern social science. What does the science say about this completely counterintuitive proposition that if you give to charity, you'll become richer? People who are charitable do much better financially than those who are not. And then I ask, well, why is it? The data proves it out and the logic supports it.
The assumption that I made was that my family was uneducated, therefore they believe in God, and went into atheism. And I had this full circle moment where essentially I came back to faith in God. I didn't say God was right, I said my mom was right.
And your mom was right. The Bible is the best ever practical guidebook ever written.
God was right. Hey everyone, I am so excited because I've got my new friend Mark Gerson here, and we're gonna have probably one of the most riveting conversations I've had in a while. As you guys know, I've had renowned astrophysicists like Dr. Hugh Ross on the channel. I've had philosophers and people of faith, and I've been in anticipation of this conversation because your book is called God Was Right.
That's right.
And the title in of itself immediately captivated me. So God was right. Guys, by the way, it's linked in the description. You've got to get this book. So without giving too much away too fast, the Torah. So for the Christians watching, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, we are people of the book. And as somebody who delved into the science and looked at it, there was a major confirmation God was right. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Absolutely.
Just to kick it off.
Yeah, so Mike, first, it's so good to be with you. And so the Torah, as you said, is Genesis through Deuteronomy. And then we have to ask, what kind of book is the Torah? What kind of book is the Bible? And we can start with what it's not. It's not a cookbook, it's not a history book, and it's not a science book. It's a guidebook. And we know that because Moses tells us in Deuteronomy, he said, this book is written for your benefit. In other words, this book is full of guidance to get you through all the challenges, all the troubles, to help you with all the opportunities that you will confront every day and on a broader, more existential basis. So the Bible is the best ever practical guidebook ever written.
I love that.
And so as a guidebook, the Bible makes lots of claims. These claims are not scientific, they're psychological. They're about who are we? What can we do? How should we interact with each other? How should we interact with God? Hundreds of claims, maybe thousands. And between the coming of the Bible about 3,000 years ago and today, lots of people have considered the question, is the Bible true? And all they've had to go by is faith and experience.
Right.
But in the 21st century, there's a new tool that's emerged, and that's social science.
Yeah.
So social scientists, without knowing it, have asked the same questions that the Bible asked. And so now we can assess with social scientific certitude, is the Bible true? In other words, is the Bible right? Is it false, or is it true in some places and not so true in other places? And the evidence is clear. God was right. The Bible is completely true. All of its claims have now been proven correct, and thus it's established itself as the quintessential, best ever guidebook that is worthy of our study, worthy of our devotion, worthy of our following. And I'm just so excited to have written this book and to share this truth with everybody.
Oh, okay. Now, let me just say this is incredibly vindicating because I've devoted my life to this book. And to have this conversation with you, well, let me just say, and I want to hear from you in a second, but for those of you watching who don't know this, I was raised in the South Chicago, where many people were just working class, low or no education. So I was the first college educated person on both sides of my family. And I'll never forget getting to Indiana University and having the biology professor who, from his classroom, his own environment where he should have been teaching us science, he made a religious statement in front of all the students and said, God does not exist, and I'm going to use this semester to prove it to you. Now, I don't know about
crazy.
The ethics surrounding that. Like, the older I get, I'm like, I don't think that was an ethical thing to do. But what I will say is it worked, because by the end of that semester, I started like kind of getting into this atheistic phase. And the assumption that I made was that my family was uneducated, therefore they believe in God. And then this guy that
Wow.
I'm meeting for the first time in this like academic environment, he's highly educated. So the smarter and more educated you are, the less likely you are to believe in God. So I made that correlation and went into atheism. And it wasn't until a couple years later, after I did this massive, I read the Hindu Vedas, the Quran, I read the Bible, I started really delving into it, that I had this full circle moment where essentially I came back to faith in God. And my statement, and I've told this testimony all over the world, was I didn't say God was right. I said my mom was right.
That's better. That's great.
So I remember crying.
Your mom was right.
Well, I ended up moving in with an Ivy League educated theologian. And he was the one that said, no, the Bible, and this was back in the early 2000s. So it's been about almost 30 years
Quite
now.
a journey, yeah.
I know, but I remember crying saying, my mom was right. So when I saw the title of your book, God Was Right, I'm like, okay, this is part 2. So how did you so that's my story in 90 seconds, but how did you end up getting to this conclusion, God was right? And did you ever have an atheistic phase? What was that like? Because you're obviously a very intelligent man, but what did that journey look like for you?
So I'm a devout Jew. My wife's a rabbi, and I've been studying the Torah every day for about 20 years. So I start my day by running 6 miles on the treadmill, and I study the Bible on the treadmill with an iPad. So I've been studying for an hour, and then I study a little bit afterwards, every day for about 20 years. And I said, this is the best book ever written. It's endlessly fascinating. It's so deep that I can study the same passage again and again, year after year, and learn something entirely new. It's a different book every time I read it because I'm a different person every time I read it. And it speaks to me, and I keep deriving new things from the same passage. I said, this is the best book ever written. And then I was also just a consumer, like a lot of people, of modern social science, because modern social science populates bestseller lists, it's on the front page of newspapers, it's in our popular culture. And then it occurred to me that what I was studying with the Bible were the same questions that were being asked by modern social science. Mm-hmm. And I said, I wonder if the findings, the scientific finding of social science, correlate with what the Bible says.
Yeah.
And I said, in order to assess this, I'm going to have a lot of different categories, because the author of the Bible claims to be right about everything. So I said, I'm going to have to investigate lots of different subjects. So I did, and it's all in God Was Right. And whatever the subject I looked into, whether it was how many times should you date before you get married, whether it was what should you wear in the morning, whether it was how should you overcome adversity, every piece of guidance the Bible gives, and it gives granular advice on all those things and many more, has been proven true by modern social science. And thus the Bible has proven itself to be what we should live by.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Okay, we had a conversation off air where we were talking about weight loss.
Right.
And you lovingly confronted me indirectly because I'm on that journey. And so what does the Bible say about that? And then specifically in your book, there's a section that addresses that.
So there are a couple things the Bible can guide us to with regards to weight loss. So there's this fascinating story in the Talmud, which is the commentary on the Bible, about a contest about what is the best verse in the Bible. And 3 of the rabbis, all of whom were very well known, they went through what we could all consider the greatest hits. Love thy neighbor as thyself. 2, 3 others that were familiar to anyone who's conversant at all with the Bible. And then Rabbi Ben Pazi comes and he says, the most important verse in the Bible is you shall bring a lamb in the morning and in the afternoon. And the Talmud says he wins by a claim. So why is the most important verse in the Bible, you shall bring a lamb in the morning and in the afternoon? It's a verse that most people, no matter how many times I've read the Bible, skip over. Certainly don't quote in church or synagogue. The reason why it won, the reason why the rabbis of the Talmud deemed it the most important verse in the Bible, because it says that what we do every day, what we do in the morning and the afternoon every day will define us as people. Wow. So it's not the spectacular moments, it's what we do all the time. In other words, it's our routine.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to weight loss, and I lost 60 pounds. So how do you lose weight? Well, you have to establish a routine where you do the same thing in the morning and the same thing in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. So it's a perfect formula for losing weight. It's also a perfect formula for living the good life. It's what am I going to do on an ordinary day, if one can assume a day is ordinary? Just how am I going to conduct my life? And instead of thinking about the big events in the future, think about tomorrow, because it's what we do consistently. It's what we do each and every day. It's what we do in the moments that compose each day that ultimately define who we are, which is why the rabbis all agreed that is the most important verse in the Bible.
Wow, I love that. So, Mark, it's when you got that revelation, was that the impetus for the weight loss? I mean, did that kind of all coexist, or did you lose weight and then realize, wait, the Bible had the recipe for this?
No, the impetus for the weight loss was a bet I made in 2001 with my friend Cory Booker when he was running for mayor of Newark at that point. And I said, look, Cory, you're running for mayor of Newark. Part of what you have to do is look good, and you're just too fat. And he said to me, well, you're too fat too. And I said, well, let's sell this like men. Who can lose more weight in 6 weeks? So that was the impetus for the weight loss. But then in the course of losing the weight and keeping it off, I kept a routine.
Yeah.
And then when I started studying the Bible years later, what I realized is that keeping a routine is not only the key to weight loss, but it's the key to doing anything well.
Yeah. Everything
done well is done by routine. And an example I cite in the book was the 2008 Olympics, the U.S. men's basketball team.
Yeah.
And Dwayne Wade was commenting. He said, no matter where we are in the world, no matter where we're training or where we're playing, if it's 8 a.m., Kobe's done his workout. Yeah. He's done his morning workout. So Kobe Bryant achieved his excellence by following exactly what the Bible said. You do the same thing in the morning and the same thing in the afternoon, no matter where you are or what you're doing. And that explains human excellence.
Oh, I love this. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
But see, so routine is so important. And in fact, when people go into, and I have the science on this in the book, when people go into rehab, the first thing they do is they get assigned a routine. And the routine is like every 15 minutes, here's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But there's a problem with routine. And this is what the great 20th century Rabbi Norman Lamb said. He said, the problem with routine is it can become boring. And he said, boredom is poison to the soul. So the author of the Torah knew this. And so what did he do? So the high priest on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, there were 8 garments he had to wear, but 4 of them he had to discard and get new ones next year. So why did he have to do that? Was the high priest a diva who couldn't wear the same thing twice? Probably not. The Torah is teaching us is that routine is important, but there needs to be newness in your routine. In order for routine to be interesting in a sustained way, we have to make newness a part of the routine. So in this case, it was the priest has to wear new clothes of the same type every year, because if routine stays the same, it gets boring, which is a poison to the soul. So the very practical advice from the Bible is everyone should establish a routine, but put newness into the routine. So if you drive to work, if you drive from your home to your office 5 days a week, on Wednesday, take a new route.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, establish a routine, but make newness a part of that routine, and therefore we'll get the benefits of the routine with the enthusiasm and the excitement of newness, which is so crucial to sustaining anything and everything.
I love it's like a sacred equation, and that's kind
right.
of what your book does. Is it decodes these sacred equations, because it's like, okay, I have routine, but I didn't put the X factor of novelty. Therefore, it creates boring, and then boring poisons the soul. So then, what you're saying is, no, God actually addressed that too.
Exactly. God got that. God said, routine and newness are not opposites. You have to incorporate newness into the routine, and then you'll have an interesting routine that you will want to sustain.
So good. And in other words, God was right.
Absolutely. God was right.
Because I think it's almost like when people think that God was wrong, they missed a part of the equation. So I think it properly takes an interpretation of the Torah as well. Now, something that I did as a Gentile is I taught the entire book of Leviticus to my church, which
That's great.
You do not see that in evangelical American culture. But what I was trying to show them was the intentionality of God, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and how that caused the Jewish people to excel in a time when many civilizations were imploding and dying. And one of the things I talked about was like violating routine, or in other words, you have the sun, which is the light for the day, and the moon, which is, and the stars, the light at night. So what do we do, especially in our modern societies? We violate that by having lights on inside and extending past that time. And then now in modern times, we hold the light up to our eyes, and we're the agents of free will. So we can do that. I can hold a light in, because I was telling my congregation, your body doesn't know what a cell phone is. but it does
That's
know
right.
that you're putting light into your eyes past a certain threshold of time. And so there's consequences of violating your circadian rhythm, and that disturbs your sleep and all that. So what I love about your book, and again, this is not a hard sell of the book. This is literally just saying we need good resources, is it's the wisdom of the ancients.
That's right.
And it's like the prophet Jeremiah talked about being a keeper of the ancient paths. And I think for us, it's not saying, well, cell phones are bad. It's saying like, okay, listen, you can bring artificial light in your environment and you can hold it in front of your eyes well past the time of night, but there will be biological and hormonal consequences for it. And you're going to pay the price. And I think in the same way, when I was taking my congregation through the book of Leviticus, and what I was saying was, it was like God was saying, there's a way to do life.
That's right.
And you can make whatever choice you want to make, but you won't get to choose the consequences of making the wrong choice, you know? So can you talk a little bit about your studies of the Torah and kind of like what that looked like from your perspective in social sciences?
Absolutely. I mean, what you said is so profound because you talked about choice and intentionality. So one of the meta lessons of the Bible is live an intentional life. So an intentional life about what? Well, there's a chapter in the book called No Small Things, because the Bible's philosophy is there's no such thing as a small thing.
Yeah.
And so intentionality works, and it should be deployed everywhere and for everything. So take your cell phone example. So the Bible also tells us, remember the changes among the generations. So the previous generation didn't have cell phones. We have cell phones. It doesn't mean we should use them, doesn't mean we shouldn't use them. It means we should consider them and use them for our benefit, use them intelligently.
Wow.
Be intentional about cell phones just like we should be intentional about everything else. Because when we use a cell phone intentionally, we can use it as a tool for communication with our loved ones. We can use it as a communication for commerce, as a communication for really profound learning, or we can lose ourselves and our soul in it. The choice is ours, but if we're intentional about it, then we can make the right choice.
Yeah. Wow. You know, that was amazing. Well, it's almost like the cell phone in and of itself is neutral. And it's like how we,
That's right.
You know, because like a cell phone in my hands reached millions of people during a global pandemic. And I was distributing confidence in a time of fear and faith in a time of worry. And so like cell phone but then cell phone in the hand of someone else could become a pornography addiction, or
That's right.
you know, whatever, or it could be used for discrimination and hatred.
Sure.
So it's almost like it's whose hand is the cell phone in. And so we had talked about this, like during the pandemic, I started showing up every day. And, you know, it's funny to me at the time of this interview to have 1.2 million YouTube subscribers, because as I explained to you, I sort of hate social media, which hopefully the algorithm didn't hear that. But like, you know, and then, but I said, it's kind of like the Mr. Rogers effect, the Fred Rogers effect, where I said, you know what, my greatest ability is availability. So I'm just going to show up every day, and that in and of itself is going to produce comfort. And there's a part of your book that kind of talks about this concept that you had mentioned. So I don't know if you can explain that.
Well, I think you said something that was really profound when you said the cell phone is neutral.
Yeah.
That is a deeply biblical insight, because what the Torah teaches us is pretty much everything is neutral. There's no, it's not that there are good and bad things, there are good and bad applications of neutral things. So the biblical teaching says, it poses a question. What if you're born under Mars? Which means, what if you're born with the need to break things and cause blood? Okay, so some people just are born with a proclivity to cause blood. Okay, so is that good or bad? Well, this is what the tradition teaches. It says you can take that characteristic and you can become a highway robber or a murderer. Or you can become a butcher, a mohel, that's the guy who does circumcisions.
Yeah.
Or a surgeon.
Wow.
So you can take the same proclivity to draw blood, and in one case, you're doing something terrible, you're a highway robber or murderer. In the other case, you're doing something sacred, you're a surgeon.
Oh, I love that.
So you're saying the cell phones are neutral was so profound and so biblical, because of course they're neutral. We can do sacred things with them, or we can do profane things with them. Are cell phones good or bad? that's not the right question. The right question are the applications, are the choices we make and how we use them good or bad?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and it's I guess the term would be like redemptive. You
Right.
know, it's like, hey, and I think for me, I avoided social media because I looked at it largely as just bad, and then the thing was like, well, maybe we can redeem it. You know, even this
Absolutely.
conversation right now is incredibly redemptive because there's going to be people that already have learned so much that they would not have learned any other way, and I love that. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, but it's such an important insight. There's only good and bad applications of neutral things. And I address this in the chapter of how can I change myself? So let's say you decide at the beginning of a season that you want to be a different person. So often we assume that change is hard. In comes the Bible and says, change is not hard and you can do it. And we know that's true. There's this fascinating experiment they talk about in the Bible. This is called the end of history illusion, because people say, I've changed a lot in the last 10 years, but I'm not going to change in the next 10 years. That persistently comes up in experiments, which is completely illogical because like, that's the end of history illusion, because today is the end of history. I have changed and now I've stopped changing. But of course we're going to change in the next 10 years and in the 10 years to follow. The only question is, do we change the way we want and do we change the way we should? And then it's, well, how should I change? Well, one way, Mike, is exactly what we were just talking about, which is understand the qualities that you have. Don't try to change those qualities. Try to channel them into something sacred. So if your quality is, I need to draw blood, fine, channel it into being a butcher, a soldier, or a surgeon. So it's all about channeling. But what if you want to develop a new characteristic? Well, again, the Bible has the answer for that. So the greatest rabbi of all time, Maimonides, he was asked by a young man. The young man said, I want to be more charitable. Should I give charity in one big gift on an annual basis, or should I give a little bit every day throughout the course of a year? And Maimonides said, that's an easy one. Give a little bit every day, because in the process of doing the thing on a consistent basis, that characteristic will become part of who you are.
Yes.
So the Bible comes in and tells us, if you want to change, you can do one of two things. Take the characteristic you have and channel it towards sacred ends, or just start doing the thing and that thing will become part of you.
Yeah.
So if you want to become more generous, you don't need to plunge the depths of your soul to think about why you're not giving as much as you'd like. Just give more than you did yesterday and more on Thursday than you did today.
Yeah.
And within about 3 months, you'll be a giver.
Yeah.
It doesn't take that long. And what the Talmud says and modern social science say pretty much maps up around the amount of time it takes to develop a new characteristic. It's totally doable. We can basically bring on 6 new characteristics a year. The time works.
Wow.
We could be an entirely different person in a year. You just have to start doing the thing. In other words, don't think too much about it. Just start doing it. If you want to be a kinder person, just start saying kind things. If it feels artificial, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Just start saying kind things. And then after a few months, you'll be a kind person.
So about 6 a year.
Right, about 6
That's
a year.
about the time
Because every
works out.
couple of months you can develop one. And you could probably develop 2 simultaneously. We can totally change ourselves in a year. All we have to do is say, who do I want to be? And then start doing the things that that kind of person would do. And then in a couple months, we will be that person.
Oh, this is so life-giving and it's hopeful. But you know what I like is that a lot of our audience is extremely intelligent, and sometimes it's their own intellect that prevents that change.
Great point.
But what you're actually saying is, no, the science backs it up. It's not just a spiritual principle in isolation, but there's all these studies and it is possible.
Just fake it till you make it.
Yes, that's a real scientifically
Absolutely.
backed principle.
Absolutely. Right. Exactly. If you want to be kinder, just start doing kind things. If you want to be more generous, just start giving, and then you will make it.
Yeah.
That characteristic will become part of who you are. And then in day 1, you're not a giving person. In 3 months, you're a deeply charitable person, only because you've given charity each day over
Yeah.
those 90-day period.
Well, there's this verse I keep thinking about. It's that God gives seed to the sower. So in other words, a lot of people will say, well, I can't be generous because I don't have a lot to give.
Ooh.
But it's not about the amount. It's about the intentionality of it. And it's just like he gives seed to the sower. So
That's
the
right.
question is, are you sowing seed? If the answer is yes, and so give what you do have to give. That's why I love that again, going back to Leviticus, I love the concept of the tithe. Because it's like that whole concept of 10% is so powerful, because it's like if you have $1, it's 10 cents. If you have $1 million, it's 100,000. It's like it scales. And so I think there's something very powerful about that. It's like, hey, God's not asking you how much you have. He's asking about, are you giving a percentage of what you have?
Right. Well, that's such an interesting point, Mike, because if people say I can't afford to give, what they should realize is they financially cannot afford not to give.
Right.
And this is in Deuteronomy, because the Bible does not like to make guarantees or promises, because if the Bible's not an ATM machine where you say a prayer or you put in a code and out comes what you expect.
Amen.
There'd be no notion of faith. You don't need to have faith in your ATM.
Wow.
Right? So the Bible makes very few guarantees, but it does make one. In Deuteronomy, it says, if you give to the poor generously and enthusiastically, you will be blessed in all of your undertakings. And that clearly means you will be blessed financially. So this is really counterintuitive, because what it's saying is if you give, you will receive more, which is counterintuitive, because if I gave you that glass, I'd have one less of it and you'd have one more of it. But what the Bible is saying, when it comes to giving to charity, if you give, that doesn't apply. If you give, you will get more. And so I said, well, what does the science say about this completely counterintuitive proposition that if you give to charity, you'll become richer? It's a guarantee in Deuteronomy, and Malachi repeats it, Malachi 3:10. So it's the So the Bible insists that if you give, you will be blessed. Well, it turns out that the data says the Bible is exactly right. That people who are charitable do much better financially than those who are not.
Yeah.
And then I asked, well, why is it? And I've been fortunate enough to be the co-founder and chairman of two charities, United Hatzalah of Israel and African Mission Healthcare. We partner with Christian missionary doctors at Christian hospitals in Africa. And one thing I've learned is no one goes online and searches for a charity and gives. People give in community. People give in relationship. Yeah. And if someone is charitably inclined, and to get to our previous conversation, if they just start acting like they're charitably inclined, they will be charitably inclined.
Yes.
But if somebody's charitably inclined, they'll inevitably do so in a group and in relationship. And then take that group. Would you rather do business with someone who gives to your church and believes in the same thing you do and sacrifices in the same way you do? Would you rather have your plumber or your lawyer or your accountant or your carpenter be a church member or a non-church member? Of course, a church member.
Right.
So the person who gives a lot to the church will end up getting business from everybody else.
Wow.
So this is kind of a very practical description of how the biblical assertion that if you give enthusiastically and generously to the poor, you will become financially successful. The data proves it out, and the logic supports it.
Wow. And I love your passion because you're speaking from experience. And the reason why I would bring it up is the same thing. I come from the culture of the poor, and God has blessed me tremendously. But I always ask people, are you a river or a reservoir? Because it's like when water when you hold water in a reservoir, if there's not movement in that water, it gets stagnant, and then that water can begin to stink and actually become poison. And so I think a lot of times our finances, you talked about kindness. I look at kindness as a form of emotional generosity, because it's great. I'll be honest with you, my natural disposition is emo. Is
what?
Emo, like depressive. And,
oh, really?
That's my natural thing. And so everybody watching right now is like, oh, these guys, this comes naturally to them. I think what we're trying to say is actually it doesn't. It's like, but what happens is you probably didn't start running 6 miles a day. You probably started running for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, built up to it. Same thing with like being charitable. It's like fear says, hold on. Faith says release. Fear's a reservoir, but faith is a river.
That's such an interesting point. And that might be why in Deuteronomy it's so clear, because people might be afraid to give because they think they'll need it. In comes God and says, let me give you a guarantee. If you give to the poor enthusiastically and generously, you will be blessed in all of your undertakings. You will become wealthier than you otherwise would have been. So just give.
Wow.
That's the biblical guarantee.
I love it. Yeah, we're tag team preaching now, because
I love it.
It's like the prophet says it. You see it in Deuteronomy, and it's almost like God knew that we were going to be extremely worried and concerned about this, and said, "Hey, in this particular issue, test me in this way."
Right.
And so, but again, where I come from, it's like people. I saw them operate in self-preservation and fear. And so I remember going on a journey of generosity, and, and it became who I am. And now that's sort of my reputation. And my wife and I distribute food across America and do all these initiatives. And I laugh because it's like you said, I became that. But I think it's also, I love what you said. It's having faith and faith being a necessary ingredient and trusting in God. And the fact that you're marrying these two worlds together of the Torah and social sciences, and then saying, hey, you can rely on that. And so what's something in this vein or something in your book that really emboldens that idea, of marrying those two worlds together?
Well, let's take the example you just gave. You said you're naturally depressive.
Forgive me.
No, the Bible actually has a lot to say, and there's a lot of that in the book about how to deal with mental health challenges. The Bible has a lot. And it has what might be the single best way to deal with sadness or depression. And it's really counterintuitive. So in early Genesis, God sends Adam out of the garden, and he sends him out with garments. Like, why garments? Like, Adam wouldn't have gone out naked otherwise, but God is saying, no, garments are important, and you wait and you'll find out why. And then we come to the story of Rebekah and Isaac, where Rebekah has to convince her twin son, Jacob, who's deserving of the blessing, that he has to impersonate Esau in order to receive the blessing from their blind father, Isaac. So Rebekah has about 20 minutes to get Jacob, who's a good boy, to impersonate Esau and to trick the old man.
Yeah.
So how does she do so? She has this incredible psychological insight. She says to Jacob, put on Esau's best clothes. Why his best clothes? Isaac is blind. He wouldn't know what clothes Jacob was wearing. Because the best clothes weren't for Isaac, they were for Jacob. Because what Rebekah knew was that we feel like what we wear and we act like how we feel. So the biblical insight is that if you want to feel a certain way, dress that way. The Bible, it even instructs the undergarments that the priests have to wear. No one's going to see the undergarments, but it's not about what others see. It's about how you feel on the same premise that we'll act how we feel and we'll feel what we wear. So enter the 21st century. Really, this is in the last 10 years. There's this emerging discipline of enclothed cognition. In other words, we think what we wear, exactly what the Bible says, or there are whole departments in universities for fashion psychology. Rebekah was a fashion psychologist. And what does fashion psychology say? Well, it says that when women are sad or depressed, they ignore about 90% of their closet. Because if you wake up and you're sad, what are you naturally going to do? You're going to put on a baggy t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. That will exacerbate the depression. That will make you sadder. Instead, if you wake up sad, look at the closet, and what the psychologists say for women, of course, is put on a floaty dress, put on fun jewelry. It says mismatch, put on a leather jacket and a skirt. And that sense of novelty, and put on colors that bring forth the outside. Like that sense of novelty, that sense of nature will make you happy. So if you want to be happy, the Bible says, dress happy. And there's fascinating experiments out of both Northwestern and Yale, which showed that students perform better in attention-seeking tasks and in negotiation workshops depending on one variable, which is how they dress. Wow. So Yale, there was an experiment where half the students were told to come as you are to participate in a negotiation workshop. The other half were told to come in suits and ties. Those in suits and ties did vastly better. Yeah. The biblical Rebekah knew this.
Wow. Okay, this has been one of the hardest interviews in the sense of not saying amen to you and shouting you down the whole time, because it's like, this is so rich and so valuable. And I just, it's funny because we share the Torah.
That's right.
And so hearing you retell these stories, and as somebody who preaches all over the world, this has been extremely revelatory for me. But let me also say this on an emotional front. And it's funny because Evan is off camera. And for those of you guys watching, many of you know Evan. Did I not just buy an entirely new wardrobe? Literally. Yeah. And it was funny because I was in a place of prayer. And I was thinking about this next season of my life, and I felt this impression on my heart that I was supposed to go get a whole new wardrobe and get clothes I actually like, which I hadn't done in a long time because I'd been working so much and traveling, and the joy that I felt and, that whole thing. And so it was probably weird for you to hear him say that because our conversations where I just feel like I need to do that. Because it's like you said, it's how it makes us feel. Right. And I think depression It has to do with the like you said, that the routine of I'm just going to wear these clothes and whatever. And there's something about like getting dressed. I think that is a psychological. Even when I have a suit on or whatever, it does change the way you hold yourself.
Absolutely. And that's what the biblical Rebecca knew, and that's why God told the priest what kind of undergarments he had to wear, because what we wear profoundly impacts how we feel. Deion Sanders put it best. He said, if you dress well, he said, if you dress good, you feel good. If you feel good, you play good. If you play good, they pay good. Exactly right.
Yeah, it's so good.
And so, a lot of people work from home. As a businessman, I totally discourage it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter for these purposes. Let's say if someone wants to work from home, and there are, of course, times when people can and must work from home, but just as a practice, I don't like it. But whatever. If you have to work from home, dress like you're in the office.
Right. That's it.
And the study's shown that you're going to be much more productive and can do much better at your job. But always dress like how you want to feel. So if you're in a work environment, even if that environment's in your home, dress accordingly. Not for anybody else, but for yourself and your own productivity. Yeah. So if you want to be happier, dress happy. If you want to be more productive, dress like a business person. Whatever it is, if you want to be a pastor or a rabbi, dress like you think a pastor or a rabbi should. And then you'll be better at whatever that is.
Yeah, I love that concept. I've heard it called social camouflage.
Oh, fascinating. I would have used that in the book. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, you can look into that. Social camouflage, the whole concept of looking the part or fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
In a way, I think what we're saying, not to be corny, is like faith it until you make it.
Oh, I love that expression. I love that. You should trademark that.
I'm here to do the next forward, the priest and the rabbi.
I love that.
But yeah, I mean, because part of the reputation I have is I get dressed every day, whether I'm working here at my house or one of our offices. But my wife thinks it's hilarious because I do get ready no matter what. But for me, I've learned some of those coping mechanisms for my own. So maybe if you're watching right now and you struggle with discouragement or depression, maybe you had said something so brilliant, about you take a lamb in the morning and in the afternoon, right?
That's the next in Leviticus, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So again, what would it look like to wake up to get dressed and to go about your day and then change your clothes and when you're done? And something that small could be one of the biggest revelations and the breakthroughs that somebody watching had right now.
Absolutely. And a lot of people think, they dress with that intentionality.
Yeah.
Right. And what the Bible is telling us is be intentional about everything. And what's the first decision? What's one of the first decisions that everyone makes? What should I wear today?
Yeah.
It's a really important decision.
Yeah.
And because it'll influence how we conduct ourselves through the rest of the day. So we should start with that intentionality. What should I wear today? Yeah. Make a good decision there and then keep being intentional throughout the rest of the day.
I love that. Yeah, and that's something I've been doing on the micro. It's like, I'm constantly reassessing my schedule and when do I pick up my phone? When do I put it down?
Right.
Those types of things. That's where that whole artificial light thing started with me. And even you go to the book of Genesis, it's like 6 days of creation, 1 day of rest, and these cycles and trying to honor those. And I think what I see is a return in culture to the wisdom of the ancients.
God willing. And I love that example you just gave. It's 6 days you shall work and the seventh you shall rest. I have a chapter out in the book too on work and rest. The precise wording of that phrase is so important because 6 days you shall work, not work shall be done, but you shall work. So there's a value of work that is independent of its output. And it doesn't say some people should work and other people shouldn't. In other words, there's no notion of retirement, right? So the kinds of work we might do will change. As we get older, we can't do the same kinds of work we did when we were younger. But what the Bible is telling us is 6 days you shall work. We should always find something where we're dependent upon, that's productive, where we're contributing. And it doesn't have to be paid work. But it has to be something that's important and that's productive. And 6 days you shall work, and the seventh you shall rest. So this is really interesting because if someone observes the Sabbath and they observe that line, how many hours a week can they work? Right? So part of observing the Sabbath is you have to prepare for the Sabbath. The great Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik used to say, everything holy requires preparation. That definitely included the Sabbath. So if someone observes the Sabbath, for 5 days a week, let's say they work 10 hours. The sixth day, you can't work the full day because you got to prepare for about half it. So let's say work a half day. So the Sabbath observer can work 55 hours a week. Now, 20th and 21st century science has asked the question, what's the optimal number of hours that people should work a week? So studies of machinists in World War I and Twitter employees in 2018 arrived at the same number, 55 hours a week. Wow. If you work more than 55 hours a week, both sets of studies showed your output plummets until you start destroying the work you did previously. So the Bible and modern science line up to the number when it comes to the hours you should week of work. The Sabbath observer works 55 hours a week, and machinists in World War I and Twitter employees, from a totally secular point of view, the study said the optimal number of hours to work a week is 55.
Wow.
It's a magical number, 55, because the Bible says that's the amount of hours you should work, and modern social science gets it to the number.
Oh, I love this. Okay, I just have to pause for a second. If you have not tapped the link in the description and bought the book while we're talking, this is your confirmation to do it right now. And I'm telling you guys, I very rarely just wholeheartedly endorse things, but the reason why we're doing this conversation is because it's just I'm sure you can tell it's absolutely necessary. So let's just go to the link right now. And I want to do this in closing because I want to tell you, Mark, the good news and the bad news.
Okay.
The good news is this is one of my most favorite conversations I've ever had on this channel.
Oh, thank you.
The bad news is there's going to be thousands of comments of people begging for you to come back.
I would love to. I've had such a good time, Mike. Thank you. Anytime. Thank you so much.
I'm just warning you. There's going to be a lot of people because I'm telling you.
I would love to do a part 2.
We're going to have to do a part 2 because this has been riveting.
Thank you.
And, I was traveling overseas and then I came back to the States. This is actually my first day technically back home. And so I want to jump deeper into the book and then let's do a part 2.
Anytime. I'd love to. Thank you so much. That would be great. What a great conversation. I look forward to part 2.
This has been so rich because, let's end how we started. So you said that the Torah is a guidebook.
Right.
And the practicality of life. I mean, we have thoroughly proven that over the last, several minutes. And there's something in this. So guys, do me a favor. Go in the comments. Let me know which thing spoke to you the most. What really stood out? What was the thing that you're like, I'm leaving this conversation and immediately implementing this? And because I'm going to look at that and we'll maybe use the comments as a basis of our next conversation. And then it gives you guys an opportunity to buy the book. And guys, listen, he's not asking this. I'm asking this. Let's get this thing bestseller status if it's not already right now. Leave reviews on Amazon. Let's do whatever we can. Remember, we're not an audience. We're an army. And we're mobilizing and we're helping the world understand what's important and what things to get behind. So go ahead and do that. And I'll be in the comment section as well, replying to you guys. Mark, thank you so much.
Oh, Mike,
I
what
want
a
to
great
give you the
conversation.
final word, though. Like, is there anything you want to say or just kind of final word before round 2?
Well, I just want to thank you, Mike, for such a great conversation. I mean, I've had such a great time, and it's just so wonderful to be able to extract the guidance, the intensely practical and always relevant and always interesting guidance from the Bible, and just to see how it can help us live better, happier, more meaningful lives in pretty much every way. So I just want to end with gratitude to you, Mike. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, guys, hit the subscribe button if you're new. Make sure you hit the thumbs up so that this gets recommended to so many more people on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next video.